we talked about, from the humanist perspective, this perhaps would be a perspective that I would like to argue one particular point, the issue of equality. I would say that equality can't be justified without reference to a greater narrative, a divine being which establishes equality. Because humans, as you said, okay, humans aren't equal. But if humans aren't equal, and certainly in nature, nature doesn't care about animals being equal, then they're not the strongest might survive, or the ones who are more fittest to pass on their genes will be able to do so, and the ones who are not. Nature doesn't care about equality and making sure everything's equal. So then where did we get this concept of equality if nature doesn't care about equality? The only where we get it from is that in the eyes of God, as Muslims we believe, all humans are equal in the eyes of God. Your soul is fundamentally equal in the eyes of God. However, you might have been born in a rich family, you might have been born to wealth, you might have had intellect or great strength or better immune system or a whole number of advantages you have in life which other people don't have. But of course, we say fundamentally equality is preserved in the hereafter, because the more blessings you receive in this life, the greater your accountability is in the next life, and the greater your responsibility with those blessings that you receive. So a poor person will have a much easier day on the day of judgment than a person who is rich, who's been given a lot. So I would say that if you don't believe in a God, then the idea of equality is just a vestigial remnant from the Christian past, which liberals or humanists imported or kept preserved, but they lack any basis to justify, except to say, well, I like this idea. Well, that's great you like it, but you can't justify it. Whereas I would argue that those that had a religious background, either Christianity or Islam, there is a basis to justify it, because in nature, nothing's equal. Nature doesn't care about equality. Evolution doesn't care about equality. It doesn't exist. So how are we equal? I'd say in the eyes of God.
I realise there are 3 more questions on the agenda, and the chair has been cavalier with the running order so far, which I suspect might be his natural style, which is fine with me. But I think I would like to just respond to that point, if that's all right. There are 2 claims that have been made there. Firstly, that the idea of equality between human beings makes no sense if you don't have a divine guarantor of it, a divine reference point. And the second claim seemed to be that actually, if you believe in life after death, that's a greater idea of equality, because people who've suffered in this life will be better off after, and people who haven't will be worse off after. They seem to be the 2 claims. But to take the first one, the idea that equality only makes sense if you have some sort of divine arbiter for it. Well, clearly there are societies across the world that have evolved theories of equality that have had nothing at all to do with a monotheistic God. That if you look at the idea of equality before the law in ancient Athens, it was explicitly based on the idea of this being a contract between human beings with no divine intervention between it. Isonomia is the Greek word for it. There are clearly various other non-Christian, non-Jewish, non-Muslim, non-monotheistic ideas of equality. This isn't to say that any society has totally lived up ever to the idea of equality. Certainly even Christian and Jewish and Muslim ones haven't. But there are plenty of ideas of equality that have nothing to do with the idea of a divine guarantor of it. My own commitment to equality stems from my acknowledgement of myself as a human being, the fact that I see something similar to myself reflected back to me out of the faces of other men and women in this world, and my desire to be treated well, and my desire, therefore, and feeling of obligation to treat others well in that same sense. And in fact, there are good social arguments for equality too. The evidence of something like The Spirit Level, a great book written about social equality and inequality, shows that even the best off in societies are happier and healthier and have longer lifespans and better outcomes if the society is more equal than if it's more unequal. So equality, it can be a practical, pragmatic, deliberate, human-created here and now concept. It doesn't have to be referred to some sort of external concept. And to say that it does is to deny the reality of social history, and also to insult people who live their lives on the basis of that principle. The second idea, the idea that equality somehow makes more sense if you sort of smear it out over eternity, so that people who've suffered in this life can then benefit in the next life. Well, that may be true if you believe in an afterlife. I don't, so that doesn't work for me. But also, I question whether that is equality either. For example, it's not something great about you that you've been born poor and have suffered all your life. It's just a coincidence about your life. So I think it's questionable as to why you should therefore benefit forever from the circumstances of the short life that you've lived in the here and now, and vice versa, why you should if you're rich. That doesn't seem like equality to me. That seems like very discriminatory treatment based on a very short period of existence compared with eternity. But maybe you're going to think about animal rights now.
Thank you very much.
I'll clap myself, shall I?
However, the issue of animal rights when it comes to eating, because we do eat some animals, that, you know, basically as humans do in most cultures and societies, it does bring up an interesting question of equality, because obviously they suffer, we suffer, they experience the world, we experience the world. Could you not argue that they deserve equal rights to human beings because they have a similarity? Of course, someone might say, but they're not having the same intelligence as human beings. Okay, but then if that's your logic, then would you say that those who are, let's say, not as intelligent as you, amongst other human beings, also deserve lesser rights by that same criteria? Does intelligence necessitate rights? So how do you justify equality from a material perspective? Right, even the ancient Greeks, which you cited, they didn't treat women and slaves equal to their males in ancient Greeks. And I think it was Aristotle, or it could be Plato, I forget which, who said that identical things should be treated equally. But humans aren't identical. So how would you justify that? And also animals are not identical to human beings. So I think that was probably maybe a response to maybe your previous point, just to show that it's still not as clear cut, because even the ancient Greeks had inequalities, and they justified those inequalities, saying that women and slaves are not identical to free men, and so don't deserve to be treated equally, even though they espoused equality, the idea of equality. So everyone has a different idea of what equality is if you are trying to base it on an arbitrary materialistic perspective. And just having similarity of something doesn't guarantee equality. I could say that chair is equal to me in having matter, but does that mean me and the chair are equal? No. I'm very comfortable sitting, of course.
Secondly, when you refer to Asian history, again, Greece specifically to per se, you said that...
A long time ago.
Yes, in the beginning one.
Yeah.
In respect to equality, you raised the issue of that in ancient Greece, women, you detached the argument of being religion and equality in ancient Greece. The thing is, in ancient Greece, from Michael Scott, who's on History Today, did raise the issue that religion was attached to the fact of women's rights. So when you say facts, I don't really trust that you're
saying. So I don't know why you're conflating these. You're completely wrong. You're completely wrong. What I was talking about was isonomia, which is the concept in the Athenian democracy of equality before the law, which was totally unreal. Are you shaking your head? Would you like to tell me what isonomia means and where it came from?
No, it's not about that.
Well, that's what I was talking about, so let me finish my point. Okay, so what I was talking about when I talked about isonomia is the Greek word which means equality before the law. And it was developed in the Athenian democracy as an idea, a political idea, divorced from any religious or divine context. Now, when I mentioned that, it was in response to the point that had been made on this side, which is to say that the only way you could have an idea of equality was if you had a Christian or Jewish heritage behind you, which you were now employing a pale imitation of. Which bit do you disagree with? Was that point not made? You're shaking your head. It looks very generic, though. That this point was made on this side by Abdullah. The only way in which a concept of equality can make sense is if you have some sort of divine reference point for it, and the only way that a humanist can have a concept of equality is because of traditions of Christian and Jewish thinking about this that went before. Now, in order to refute that point, I gave an example of a pre-Christian, pre-Jewish idea about equality, which was completely disconnected both from belief in God and from religion. Thus, I was attempting to demonstrate that it was false that you needed belief about a God to have a concept of equality. Now, which part of that is incorrect? Which part of that is incorrect? What's that got to do with anything? If whether or not the Greeks were equal was not the question. What your claim was that it was impossible to have a concept of equality if you didn't have a Christian heritage. Now, having a concept of equality is not the same as having an equal society. No society is equal in the world today.
No, I didn't say a concept of equality. I said equality. An idea of equality. Where all humans are equal. But the Greeks didn't believe all humans were equal, and that was my point.
I didn't say they believed that all humans were equal.
Yeah, well, that was my point then. I said it's very.
Humans were different because you were saying that women were different from men. So
that's what the Greeks were saying. That's what the Greeks were saying.
The Greeks said it, and you said it.
Well, women are different.
But
Women are.
The Greeks were right. Was in the idea that you could have a concept of equality without God. I mean, do you understand that to give an example doesn't mean that you agree with everything that was happening in the world at the time when the example comes from?
It's been a fact. When Microscope from History Today, who I presume has more validity than what you said,
Why?
He specifically stated at the time ancient Greece was a religious society and women's rights actually did derive from examples of goddess and women priests. You disregarded that and detached that argument and just focus on a narrow perspective.
Isonomia has nothing to do with equal rights for men and women. It's a concept of equality about citizenship. And that was my example of equality. The example is to say, here is an example of equality that existed without reference to a divine arbiter, without reference to a Judeo-Christian idea or a Muslim idea.
Actually, my question regarding to that, actually that gentleman in his talk, he mentioned several times, even without a God, we can talk about the equality, and he believed in existence. Somebody talk about, my point is, somebody talk about existence when already have faith in God, have faith in Creator. Otherwise you can't talk about equality or moral basis or justice without existence or without the faith in God. Because, issue of the equality completely is a very deep, and issue of the existence very deep.
Your question. I don't think there's any more you can say to make the question clear.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I certainly don't think that a creator entity is required for existence. I think that, like almost every other process that we've discovered in the universe, it is equally likely that there will turn out to be a naturalistic explanation for the origin of the place where we currently live, which may not be the first universe that's ever existed, may not be the last, and we don't really know enough about it. And
that's the point.
Hold on. Moving away from that sort of cosmic level, which I think has very little, if anything, to do with human affairs, to the sort of human questions that you're talking about concepts of equality and social justice, I don't think that you can link concepts of equality and social justice in this here and now small corner of the universe that we live in with those bigger cosmic questions. To me, and I'm just explaining to you how I approach these questions, to me, those questions about the universe, how it developed in the way that it has developed, where the different parts of it came from, how they work and how they're interrelated, to me, they're questions of how the world is. What is out there? Why is it as it is? How do we explain it as far as we can? And we may not ever understand everything because we're limited animals. Those other sorts of questions are not questions in the same way of what is, questions of social justice, questions of equality. To me, they're questions of what matters. What do we feel matters? What do we feel gives meaning to our lives? What do we feel is the right and wrong thing to do in the situations that we find ourselves in where other people are an important part of our calculations? And those questions, to me, are entirely to be divorced from questions of the reality of the universe and how that came to be. Now, I entirely accept that if you believe that the universe came into existence through the will of a deity, and beyond that, you know, or you think you know, precisely which specific deity that was, and you also believe that that deity has communicated in some way or another to you personally, or to people whom you know, or to people long ago whose words you believe, what you should do, then those two questions are linked. The question of why the universe is as it is and what we should do here and now are linked. For me, they are two separate questions, and so not linked in any way.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to, I suppose, clarify what I said and also what you just mentioned now. When I said that equality requires a concept, a belief in the concept of God, the Aristotle posited the concept that identical things, should be treated equally. Which is self-evident. If something is exactly the same, then they should be. Then two things are exactly the same. They should be treated equally. It's self-evident. But how do you make things equal which are different from each other? from what basis are you going to make things which are different from each other equal or deserve to be treated equally? It's not then self-evident to do so. To then say that human beings, which the Greeks saw that men are not equal to women, not equal to slaves, so they are all to be treated not equally, and that is consistent with our concept of equality. That's what the Greeks believed in. But if you want to believe that there's an equality between things which are different or have different attributes, that requires the belief in a God. And if you say, well, because then what are the possibilities? If you say if it is due to their similarity that makes them equal, then which similarity have you chosen? So, for example, if I say that chair is equal to me because we're both made of matter, we are both similar in that we're made of matter. It's arbitrary. There is no basis to say why you're equal.
What if the similarity is the relevant similarity? I mean, the similarity between you and the situation. The situation defines relevance. Now, to say that you and the chair have your material nature in common is to point to one of your similarities, but it's to point to an irrelevant similarity. And by making that point now, you attempt to suggest that similarity is always arbitrary, but it isn't.
But what defines relevance?
Situation. Situation defines relevance. If you're saying, here is a job, it requires this particular set of skills, then the relevant similarity between two potential applicants for that job is not the fact they're both made of matter or they've both got hair, but whether or not they're both capable of doing that job. And that is true whether or not one is a man and one is a woman. So in every situation that we have to make choices, the similarity that we pick out has to be relevant, not arbitrary, and that answers your point.
Okay, so then bringing an example then. So if we're talking about military matters where men have greater strength, greater stamina and endurance.
Not other men.
Okay, sure, but...
I'm weaker than a woman bodybuilder.
That's...
Not Miss World, the strong one.
Yeah, all right.
Miss Very Strong, 3 years in a row.
Sure, all right, that's fine. But if we are drawing on who should be inducted into, let's say, military to defend against a particular enemy and so on, then surely there's going to be a disproportionate number of men in there than women, surely, right?
Disproportionate, but is the situation one where you have to make big claims, or can't you assess each case on its merits?
Well, it would depend. I mean, like does the state have enough time to go through every single individual and say, right, what do you feel like, and what is the situation, and so on and so forth, and perhaps, yeah. But then again, perhaps if people aren't given some kind of a narrative and so on, then they're not. They don't see themselves. They won't become the person that they could become. They won't reach their potential with that narrative. You just say whatever, do what you wish, and they don't know what to do in their life, and they have this existential angst about what am I going to do, what am I not going to do. I mean, all that narrative provides is that it gives them purpose. And it gives them purpose based on human proclivities. I mean, it's like saying no one goes to an ant farm and say, oh, that soldier ant doesn't want to become a soldier anymore. He wants to be a worker ant or wants to be the queen. You can't just change their role because they don't like it anymore and so on. It's just biology has created that situation. I'm not saying, now I'm only talking about the issues of, for example, in the military. As I said before, intellectually speaking, there's no evidence to say that men and women are different in any way in their capacity to rationalize, and Islam doesn't say that they are different in any way in their capacity to rationalize and think, of course. But in the issue, for example, of coal mining or in military defense...
But a moment ago you said that men and women could both join the army under Islamic principles.
Yeah, they can.
Oh, well,
they could, but the obligation is on men because the proclivities are within the human race are that men are generally, as one biologist call it, modified women, as in stronger, more able, more stamina and so on and so forth to survive the rigors of battle or to defend against what have you, the external world. This is what I mean. Biologists, evolutionists are saying, not really me saying this or just citing my doctrine. But I'll give you another example, right? All right. So let's say equality. Okay. All right. Fine. So does everyone have the same reproductive rights according to your concept of equality? Yeah. Okay. So
what sort of rights?
Well, reproductive rights.
Well, that's a label for a lot of different rights. I mean, does everyone have the right to proceed with their pregnancy, for example, or does everyone have the right to have sex with whoever they want, or does everyone have the right to use a condom, or does everyone have
to proceed with their pregnancy?
Proceed with their pregnancy.
Yeah.
Does everyone have the right to do so?
Does anyone have the right to see their child born, or proceed not aborted, for example?
I think that in most cases people have the right to proceed with their pregnancy. Yes.
What other cases?
Well, there are obviously some very, very difficult cases where a woman wishes to proceed with her pregnancy, but it is almost certain that both she and the baby will die.
Okay, but what if she wants to proceed with her pregnancy, or let's say what she wants to terminate her child, but her partner...
A pregnancy, it's become a child.
Okay, a pregnancy. If she wants to terminate her pregnancy, but her male partner doesn't want that pregnancy to be terminated, does he have a right to see his his offspring, become a baby?
Does he have the right to do so?
Yeah, to protect it from being aborted.
I think if we want to express
if it's equal rights,
we have to think about the consequences. We have to think about the consequences for the woman. Are we willing, for example, to restrain the woman? Are we willing to tie her down to the bed, as, for example, in Romania used to be done when abortion was illegal? Women were literally chained up so that they would be forced to give birth.
No, you could say a punishment if they abort.
So a woman would be punished for having aborted her child. But that wouldn't secure
against the will of the father of that child.
And you would, well, then you would.
It's not the father have the equal right to decide whether the.
I don't think that a man would have an equal right over a woman's body as a woman now.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. You've actually proven the point. Is that you say because the woman is of a different condition in the issue of pregnancy, she has different rights or to men. You see, you've actually, although I don't agree with that issue of abortion so in the first place, but I'm just illustrating to you that because of a biological difference, there are different rights given in this society. You see, man has no choice. If he wants to have a child, and his wife or his girlfriend is pregnant, and the girlfriend says, "I don't want a child, I want to abort," right? He can't do nothing to stop that. His own flesh and blood that he helped create from coming to fruition, to life. He can't do nothing to do that. Whereas she has all the power to decide. And, isn't that an inequality of rights based on? Well, exactly. I've made my point. Thanks.
I've got a hand over there.
Since there is no one representing the president on the panel, I just wish to state that in the eyes of God, in the Bible, men and women are created equally. Now, the difference is that responsibility. Now, men have been given more responsibilities than women. Society now is fighting the subject of equality is all the subject of give us equal responsibilities as men. It is not, I mean, we love the women love us. The Bible says that we should love our neighbors as ourselves. We should treat them equally. But when it comes to responsibility, yes, it's all about physiological, biological structure. Can you handle the same responsibilities as a man? Certain jobs are given, or men are prioritizing certain jobs, mainly because research has shown that they are able to do that better than women, and women are able to handle certain jobs better because research has shown that women can handle it better. If research can prove otherwise... Sorry?
What sort of jobs are you talking about?
Well, for instance...
And what research?
For instance, if you take a woman going into army, women are known to be very sympathetic. More than men. What research are you talking about? Well, we're talking about Hofstede's dimension, that talks about feminist society and masculine society.
And is that research that women and men are universally identical in this respect?
Sorry?
Are you saying that this is a reason to distinguish between all women and all men?
Well, what I'm stating is that because the feminist societies were associated, the research that was done was shown that certain organizations in certain countries that had more females showed certain characteristics. And so if you read carefully about Hofstede's dimensions of culture, it shows that yes, certain societies are more feminist, meaning that they look at the softer side of society. If you send such people, for instance, who personally have got feministic abilities, or if you send females to war, the tendency is that they'll see someone battling, or they will not be able to kill their opponent, or they'll be more sympathetic towards their enemies than men. Men are achievement-oriented. Men are voiceless.
This is research conducted at a social level. What has it got to do?
Yes, what I'm saying now is that we are trying to make society equal, basically because society is now fighting for equal responsibilities. That's my opinion. The way we treat women and the way we treat men. If you don't beat your wife, you don't expect your wife to beat you. How you treat your neighbor the same way it cuts across. That's the golden rule in every religion. Treat your neighbor as you want your neighbor to treat you. that alone connotes, if you believe in that, it connotes that equality cuts across every religion. So far as you believe in that golden rule, that treat your neighbor as you want your neighbor to treat you, it means there is equality. Now the difference is responsibility. And that is what everyone is fighting for right now. And women want equal rights, or responsibilities as men. That is my opinion. It's all about responsibilities, and that is it.
Thank you very much for that. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, okay, when it comes to research as to whether women are more sympathetic or men are more goal-orientated, obviously there's research is still going back and forth on this currently on sexual dimorphism and obviously neuroscience and so on. So I won't really comment on that. I'll leave that to the scientists to look at and make those assertions. But what they do witness is certain proclivities. Right, so certain what they did witness, for example, that male and females, women will generally at some point in their careers want to opt to do less work and have more work-life balance. Take care of their family. They've observed that in statistics. They've seen that even in Sweden, which is a very strong feministic kind of society and so on. They try to equalize women going into doing engineering, for example, at 50% quotas or at least 40% quotas. And they tried to make incentives. As soon as they took those incentives away, it reverted back to being disproportionately male. And there's a whole discussion as to, well, why was this about? Because our culture doesn't say, we don't encourage women to do women's roles and men to do men's roles. So why is it that women aren't being miners or engineers and as much as men are doing it? And it's just, they've just noticed these proclivities. But I don't think that we should say that women can't be minors because of these proclivities and so on. That's just what they've noticed. There might be something behind just culture and maybe something more innate or biological that determines this to be the case. But that's being debated by scientists at the moment. But what I will say is this. When I talked about narratives, and I think my esteemed colleagues mentioned that maybe you should judge things on a case-by-case basis. I think, well, practically speaking, the state has never done this. Example: alcohol limits, right? They set an alcohol limit based on what they think that most human beings, if they imbibed beyond this, they would be incapable of driving their car. Right? But there are human beings that can take quite a lot of alcohol before they become inebriated, and others who only a very small amount and they are inebriated. Should you say, why doesn't the state test everyone for their alcohol tolerance and give a case-by-case basis to judge everyone? No, it has to give a blanket law based on averages or based on the proclivities of human or what have you. It has to give a blanket law, but it can't practically judge people on a case-by-case basis. So that's the point. I'm not really going to argue that women should be withheld from roles which require more goal-orientated focus. Sure. But what I will say is this, right? That this is not even a theological debate between theologians and atheists. Even amongst atheists, there is a debate about this. Like Christopher Hitchens said, he wouldn't want his wife to go into the world of work because he doesn't want the women to be coarsened by the real world of the world of work. This is what Christopher Hitchens said. So this debate issue is not just between religious people and atheists. Even amongst atheists themselves and evolutionary biologists, there's this debate about whether natural proclivities of men and women differences and whether different roles. This debate is ongoing. It's not as homogenous as some atheists would like to portray. It is different. Of course, he's portrayed it being heterogeneous as well. So yeah.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to take any more questions because we've run over our time for tonight. And I would just like to thank everyone who had come out today. I hope you guys enjoyed this and you learned a bit more from the